Hello friends! Welcome to another video, this one being a combination of the videos I took while working on my cosplay of Fancy Alastor from Hazbin Hotel. No, this is not a canon look to the series, this is a self-designed outfit that was to match a bit more closely to the pattern that I chose to use. I made him for the single pattern contest at what was supposed to be CostumeCon 38. You can see footage of me wearing this cosplay in my Not CostumeCon 38 vlog, which I'll link below. The idea of the single pattern contest is that the conference staff choose 3 to 4 commercially available patterns for attendees to choose from to use. You can use one or all of them put together, stay loyal, or transform it entirely. I went the transformation route as I used McCall's 7271 based on the fairy godmother in the 2015 live-action Cinderella, and I turned it into Alastor's coat. I really enjoyed making this costume, and I'm proud of how he turned out, and I hope you enjoy the end results as much as I do. So, it's about 9:45 at night. I've been working on Alastor for the last couple hours. I had to fix the front and back piece patterns so that I actually had the point. So now, front pieces, the back, and I have the like skirt done. Well, kind of partly. I need to sew this together, potentially taper that in a little bit, and then put the skirt on. So yeah, he's finally starting to come together. Fun fact, I started Fancy Alastor in November. He was finished in February. I'm glad I took my time in making him, and I'm going to be honest, the fastest part of making him was literally just sewing the bodice and skirt pieces of the coat together. I actually think I spent more time just pinning the fronts and backs and the skirts of the coat than I did actually sewing them. Looking at this footage now, I definitely spent more time pinning than I actually did sewing, at least on my machine. I also tried to see if a stock lace that I had could be used for the stripes on the coat. Nope, not enough of it. I did use it in other ways on Alastor, though. Full disclosure, I watched the pilot a lot while making this. Just a wild goose chase and my dream. Full disclosure that the ribbon pinstripes probably took the longest out of all of my details on the coat, except for the trim that went around the entire edge of the coat. Could I have done these pinstripes a different way? More than likely. But considering that I was using matte satin for most of the coat, I wanted to use something just as nice and would definitely have a much better finish than if I had used, say, like paint. I actually kept a rough idea of how long it took me to do all of these pinstripes for a total of sewing 4 for the front and 4 for the back, 8 in total. It roughed out to be about 4 hours in total, which was a lot longer than I had expected, but hey. A couple of days later, when the pinstripes were completely finished and I had ironed the entire body of the coat, I decided I was going to focus on the sleeves and actually get the ridiculous flounces made. I spent a long time gathering the inner edges for both flounces, to the point where 3/4 of my time of gathering it is cut out, and I only filmed one of them, and it was more than long enough to do this process. Fun fact, I hate hand gathering. Don't get me wrong, I like how gathered fabric looks. I just cannot stand the process of pulling the threads through. Honestly, if I'm going to do any gathering, it's going to be on my machine where it drives me less insane. And even then, put it this way, I really wish I had a ruffle foot so I didn't have to do it myself. A presser foot could do it for me instead. And yet, strangely, I like the process of adding a gathered piece for a garment onto the part that it's going to be attached to. Like here for Alastor's sleeves, where I'm attaching it there. I actually enjoyed this process, and I don't know why, but that part relaxes me, but the actual gathering just frustrates me beyond belief. I found this handy little tutorial online about how to properly hem a curved edge, where it said to stitch a line along the edge and then iron along that edge and then sew it down, folding it over, and it actually worked out pretty well. Remember that aforementioned lace I had wanted to use for the stripes? Well, I ended up putting it on the cuffs around where the flounce was, and I really like how it turned out. Full disclosure that I absolutely hate hand sewing with a burning passion. You're probably going to ask why I would hand sew the lace instead of using my machine. Well, it was a lot easier since the sleeve was already sewn in place. I didn't really film anything of my next steps for this, unfortunately, and that's on me. But I do have some work in progress images, which will be going with a more in-depth blog on my website. The collar was made using some stock satin that I had, and since I didn't have enough in big enough pieces, I cut the collar into 4 pieces instead of the standard 2, and covered the center seam using a ribbon. To ensure that the points kept their shape, there was interfacing buckram and fiberfill inside to support this crazy point. A little insane, but hey, I'm really happy with the outcome. I hand sewed this black lace on top, and it was only used on the shoulder points on the coat and on the bottom cuffs of the pants. I really want to find a reason to buy this lace again and use it in another project. Here's a shot of the inside of one of the points before I put the fiberfill in. Yes, that's just the buckram you see there, and the interfacing is between the buckram and the matte satin. Full disclosure that it is really hard to hand sew through buckram because it is so stiff. Also, I'm really happy that I was able to almost perfectly match up my stripes. Here's that red lace again, and me hand sewing it to the cuff of my pants. Thankfully, I had enough fabric in my stash and of a really nice fabric that I didn't have to buy fabric for making my pants. Thank goodness for saving money somehow. Bonus that the black lace that I used on the points for the coat, I also overlapped with the red lace. I think the monocle for Alastor was perhaps the most fun piece to do in the entire costume. To make his monocle, I just used a found loop that I bought at Michael's, some wire, which I wrapped all the way around the loop and made the nose piece and the earpiece. I used Worbla TranspArt for the lens, colored with a red Copic marker, and I just used contact cement to secure it to the back. And then I filmed most of the process of stringing the beads onto literally fishing line. Yep, I used fishing line to put the beads on. And what can I say? It worked really well, and it was on hand. And if you heard "Hey, listen" in the background, that is my phone notification. No, I didn't turn it off during this, and I wasn't about to record this part for a 5th time. Because this was to be his fancy monocle, I alternated between absolutely tiny little 2mm beads and the big round beads. I really like how this turned out, even though it admittedly did make the monocle pretty heavy to wear, and I'm figuring out how I can potentially fix this for future wears. To make sure that I was having it long enough, I did have to regularly check the length in comparison to where it would sit while on my face. And I also had to make sure I was going to have enough fishing line left over to make sure I could actually, tie it to the little loop attached to the monocle. In the end, I used all of the big round beads that I had bought for this. I still have a lot of the little 2mm beads left over, as you can see. And if you have suggestions of what I can use these little beads for, please feel free to tell me, because at the time of recording this, I honestly have no idea what I could potentially use them for. Once the monocle was done, I set to making Alastor's antlers. I can't really describe how I made them because I've never made antlers before these. All I did was just use wire and Lumen's Workshop foam clay that I got from Arta Wigs Canada. They were pretty fun to make though, I will admit. Once I had the antlers completely done the way I wanted them to be, I set them out into the trailer to set. And it was probably a week later that I went back to them finally. I'm going to admit right here and now that I saved doing the wig for the very end in the rest of the costume. The reason for that being, I am not that strong at wig styling or wig making. It is honestly my least favorite part of making any cosplay. But unlike a lot of my costumes, I couldn't just get away with buying a wig and doing some minor styling. Alastor's hair is extremely stylized, and I wanted to make sure that I was going to get this right. The first thing I did for Alastor's wig was sew in the black wefts along the back and sides. This was a long and tedious process, and because it's not really all that interesting to watch and there's lots of tutorials on it, I didn't film this part. I got a little creative because I wanted to have a bit more floof for the back and sides of the wig. So I took some tulle that I had on hand and gathered it on my machine and sewed it into the wig. Once I had it completely done, I was so happy with the outcome of this, and I do not regret my decision to put tulle in the wig. I do, however, plan to add more black wefts because looking at photos of the back of the costume and some of my TikToks where I can see the back of the wig, I really need to add in more black because there is some gaps. Once I was done with the wefts and the tulle, I started off with making the hair flutes. At least that is what Vivzy Pop calls them, even though they look more like deer ears. But she has assured the fandom that they are not in fact ears, they are part of his hair. Which changed my entire plan of how I wanted to do this part. So I cut them out of regular craft foam that you can buy at like Michael's or Walmart. And I used my heat gun to curve and shape them to the way I needed them to be. I probably should have filmed this part, but before I started adding on the wefts, I hot glued some wire on to help stabilize and give a little bit of extra support through the shape of the floof. It also made it easier to attach them into the wig later when they were completely done. This is where my life became a living nightmare. I absolutely hate gluing wig fiber onto foam. Thankfully, I did have a bit of practice with making Shinkoyo from Soul Hunter in the summer of 2018. If you don't know this character, his hair is very cone-like, and I wanted to achieve that shape. So I used craft foam and just used white glue to glue the wig fiber on. I now have a much better understanding of what I should have done with that, so I applied it here. I think it was about noon when I had started gluing all of the wig fiber to the foam, and I completed this process at around 10 o'clock at night. In between laying out all the black on both front and back of the foam, and then laying out all the red on both front and back of the foam, making sure I applied a few layers of both colors. I was so happy when this process was done. I can't even begin to describe how frustrated I got doing this. Eventually, the wig was complete, and I'm going to be honest, it turned out better than I thought it would. I did admittedly make the hair flutes a little too long, so they resemble more closely to rabbit ears, but considering that I'm not the strongest at wig styling, I'll take it as a win anyway. I used the wire attached to the foam and some hot glue to make sure that they would stay in the wig. They have since needed to be fixed repeatedly. I'm most proud of the bangs though, because damn, they actually look like anime bangs. And adding the antlers in was a lot of fun, and doing wigs like Kuja, where I was putting in feathers, was great practice to prepare me for this. Overall, I think my Fancy Alastor is definitely one of the best costumes I have ever made. I really enjoy wearing him. He's so much fun to act out as. There is not a single thing I would change about this costume. Well, except maybe the bow tie, since the bow tie that I used for this costume was from my bill cipher that I made 3 years prior. The only things I did not make from scratch for this were the dress shirt and, of course, the gloves. The gloves are the ones that I had bought in Quebec City when I went there for vacation, and the red dress shirt I had actually bought 9 years ago for a different cosplay, and then come time for the convention, I couldn't find the darn thing. I hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making this costume. If you like my Fancy Alastor, please let me know in the comment section below, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. I'm hoping to make these kinds of videos more of a regular thing, so we will see in time. Bye everybody, have a good day!